Hey everybody, this is our lesson on antibiotics and resistance. So first, let's make sure we understand what antibiotics are. So these are a class of medicine that's used to treat bacterial infections. You are not given these for viral infections, so you have to have a certain test by the doctor done to determine if an antibiotic is what you need. Originally, antibiotics were a substance produced by one microorganism that selectively inhibits the growth of another. And eventually, we came up with synthetic antibiotics, which are chemically related to the natural antibiotics, and they have been produced that accomplish comparable tasks. So we don't have to, grow those natural antibiotics. We can now make synthetics much more quickly, and then that can help to still give the same result that's expected. In 1926, Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin, and we know that that is mold, right? And it's a substance produced by fungi that appeared able to inhibit bacterial growth. So in a lot of your antibiotics, you'll have some sort of fungal product. You can think penicillin, amoxicillin, that cillin ending right there is kind of what you look for that. In 1939, Edward Chain and Howard Florey, they studied penicillin more and ended up taking trials out for penicillin on humans. And then Fleming, Florey, and Chain won the Nobel Prize in 1945 for their work on antibiotics and, figuring out how to use them in terms of human use. So some examples of antibiotics, some you've probably heard of, are doxycycline, penicillin, amoxicillin, tetracycline, and cephalexin. Cephalexin is one that's given very often, as well as amoxicillin. The other ones you may have come in contact with as well. So sometimes when you become sick, there are medicines out there that can help you. Sometimes they're not. Like I said, with viral, it really just has to run its course. But if you are sick from a bacteria, your doctor will probably give you an antibiotic. And these are chemicals that kill bacteria without harming the other cells. These do not help against viral infections, and these medicines are available to help you manage your symptoms until your immune system takes control in terms of your viral infections. Now, since antibiotics have been around for a while, there are certain bacteria that have evolved to become antibiotic resistant. And this is just an ability of bacteria to resist the effects of an antibiotic to which they were once sensitive. So certain bacteria that were easily killed by antibiotics in the past have morphed over time to where they are less susceptible to being broken down by that antibiotic. And antibiotic resistance is a major concern of overuse of antibiotics. So, for instance, I'll just use my daughter as an example. She had ear infections multiple times. They give you an antibiotic for ear infections. Well, after she had used so many and not wanting to keep using those to where her body becomes resistant to using them, or her body actually doesn't even know how to function necessarily without them because her immune system hasn't been given time to adjust on its own, then they look into other options like an ENT to look at her ears, other courses, if there is surgery involved, things like that could help to relieve those issues. But this is a concern because eventually it could make it where the antibiotic is null and void, and then you can never really use it again. So this is why you're instructed to take antibiotics exactly as prescribed. So, twice a day for 7 days, 10 milliliters once a day for 12 days, whatever it may be. And to finish the course of antibiotics, even if you start to feel better. So a lot of times when you use antibiotics, you'll feel better after 2 or 3 days on the antibiotic. You need to continue to use it because if you don't, then your body is having to work harder anyway to still fight off the infection that you still have or the bacteria that you still have. We need to kill it, eradicate it, and then dispose of the antibiotic that's left. So antibiotic resistance develops through natural selection, and some examples that you may have heard of, the main one here is MRSA. So that's methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, or aureus. So this is a very, very serious infection when you get it because it is it's a staph infection, and staph infections are treated with methicillin. This is specifically resistant to that, so that antibiotic will not work. You have penicillin-resistant enterococcus, and then multi-drug resistant Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And this is resistant to 2 tuberculosis drugs, which are listed here. So you're more likely to be affected by that disease or infection. And here's just a picture to show you kind of what happens. As you have an antibiotic, the bacteria that is resistant can continue to populate and outweigh the bacteria that is not resistant. So I'm going to pause this, and I can put this link up on the Canvas page. I don't want to spend time watching this right now, so I'm going to put this up on the Canvas page for you. I would very much suggest to watch this. So now that we've talked about bacteria and antibiotics, let's talk a little bit about viruses. So viruses are non-living pathogens that can cause illnesses in many different organisms, and they can only be able to replicate using a host cell. So they basically take a cell over and use that to replicate the DNA that's needed to spread the virus. And viruses can infect all types of life forms, from animals to plants to microorganisms, bacteria, archaea, any of that stuff. And antibiotics themselves are not effective against viruses. This is why you don't always get an antibiotic when you're sick. So if you've ever gone to the doctor and the doctor has just said, we can't really give you anything for that, that's most likely because you have a viral infection or a viral illness as opposed to a bacterial. Now, we do have what are called antivirals, and those are a class of medication that can be used to treat viral illnesses. And most of these are used for a specific viral infection. So that means, whereas some of our bacterial, like our antibiotics, can cover a wide range of bacterial infections. So you might get cephalexin for a couple different things, or amoxicillin for a couple different things. It'll still treat it. Antivirals are viral specific. So unlike most antibiotics, these drugs do not destroy the target pathogen. They just hinder the development. So they keep it from growing and from populating. Most of the antiviral drugs now available are designed to deal with very traumatic viral infections. So HIV, any of the herpes viruses, hepatitis B and C, and then the flu. So if you get a flu shot every year, that's an example of an antiviral. And then researchers are working to extend the range of antivirals to other families of pathogens. These will treat viral illness after exposure. So you have a primary exposure and then a secondary exposure. The primary exposure is usually through that antiviral, like a vaccine, the flu. You get that primary exposure, your body learns to fight it, and then a secondary exposure, you would be much more able to handle it. But you can protect yourself against viral illnesses, like I said, by getting a vaccine. Remember that vaccines, as mentioned in previous lessons, are inactivated viruses. So these are not living viruses. Viruses themselves are dead anyway, but this is not an active growing viral sample that you're getting. It's just there so that your body can see it without it causing problems, and then know how to fight it if it's exposed again. So the immune system will respond to the vaccine by developing white blood cells to combat that specific pathogen. And then, just like with other vaccines against viruses, these help to build your herd immunity, which is why